Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Journey Journals. My name is Gaia from Life of Gaia, and today we're going to be exploring an intriguing topic, which is men's initiation and rites of passage. And today I'm excited to have with me Cesar Rodriguez. Welcome, Cesar.
Thank you. So excited to be here. Good to see you again, Gaia.
Thank you, Cesar. Likewise. So, for those of you in the audience, if you've ever been interested in men's consciousness circles, men's rites of passage, reshaping the narrative around healthy masculinity, fatherhood, and even plant medicine ceremonies, then today's interview is definitely for you. So, we're going to jump right in. And Cesar, I'd like to welcome you again. And if you could start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what got you into the whole topic of rites of passage, the significance around them, and initiation in men's lives?
Wow. Well, thank you. And just to share a bit about myself, I was a coach with an organization called Landmark for 6 years. I think that's where we met. And eventually left that organization when I realized that it didn't go as deep as I needed and also others really needed to really do that deeper level of inner healing, right? Because you can, as an Akashic record reader told me, you can understand why you became the way you became, but you can't convince the body not to hurt, right? In the book, The Body Keeps the Score has gone viral. It talks all about how when these traumatic experiences happen to everybody, whether it's shock trauma or developmental trauma, they stay in the body. So I dove 2 years just head first, and I got rid of anything that would get in the way, pretty much quit everything in my life except my business to pay my bills, and just started exploring healing for a good 2 years in Costa Rica. Started that journey alone, 2 months, and in a small little beach town. And after taking the 2 year break to really be in my own process, do my own inner healing, which fortunately went successfully, I went back into coaching, right? So now I've been supporting men to do that deeper level of inner healing, connect with the heart. So that's what that means. Men's work coach is to support men in connecting to the heart, which is the place where you find your essence, where you find your truth of who you are, so it can guide you for a lifetime.
Cesar, what initially inspired you to get started with this work, and how do you actually see it impacting men's lives day to day?
I think the initial inspiration was from my own need for truth, for my own need for authenticity, and just seeing how the conditioning from society, expectations from the societal norm in the modern world, how they just really got in the way of seeing what is my authentic lifestyle, right? So initially it was my own need, and I also just love people. So I started saying, like, wait a second, I'm not the only one that has experienced feeling lost, feeling like I lacked sense of direction in life. And that's when I was like, okay, well, this is something that everybody really needs. And not just feeling lost in life, also being able to have genuine connections with other people, particularly in relationship with the opposite sex. So we can't show up authentically and fully without first having filled our own cup within our own hearts, right? So yeah, I became passionate about that work.
Amazing. And for the viewers who have never experienced what a men's circle is, could you walk us through, what it looks like or what happens in one?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's quite a few different ways that a men's circle can go. The Mankind Project is pretty much the organization that pioneered on these modern men's circles, and there's been several organizations that branched off of the Mankind Project, which is a nonprofit organization. So we stick a bit to that model that they pioneered, which is it goes through 4 different rounds: the lover, the warrior, the magician, and the king. And when we can play with it, right, we can shift it around a bit. But really, the essence is initially just guys come together and everybody just checks in. This is how my inner world's doing. This is how my outer world's doing. That's the lover, right? Really checking in on the heart. And then the warrior is like, okay, how did your stretches go from last gathering, right? You said you were gonna start working out 5 times a week. How did you do, right? The warrior is the one that needs that discipline, And the circle provides accountability, which is a beautiful part of creating community and supporting each other in raising ourselves up. And then the magician round, right? The magician is the master of the inner worlds, right? So the magician round is usually the bulk of it, and it's the sometimes called the work round. And we just have a prompt or exercises where we look to see what's within us, what obstacles are stopping me from being who I want to be or accomplishing what I want to accomplish, or sometimes just allow ourselves to be held, right? And somebody might raise their hand and say, hey, I could actually, sit in not the hot seat, but we like to call it the king's throne, right? And the king summons the king's court, and everybody becomes kind of like an advisor or just a space holder where somebody's being held through some challenging process that they're going through, and they can ask and communicate how they want to be supported, whether they want advice or something. And it's super fruitful. It's really beautiful. And then lastly, it's the King's Round, where we really just bless and acknowledge anything that we want to, something that we're walking away with, another brother in the circle for contributing something valuable to us, or send a blessing to somebody in our life that's not there in that moment. So that's kind of the gist of it. And they usually go from anywhere from hour and a half to 3 hours, depending how they're being ran. Mine that I do online goes 90 minutes. We do that twice a month. So it's been really amazing.
It sounds like an extremely valuable and nurturing experience. Is it something that happens in person, online, or a combination?
Right. So they can be both. I participate in two different ones. So I started one online about 2 years ago. Then it's been just so beautiful to watch the brothers develop that sense of brotherhood and that depth. And then I actually started one here where I live in Santa Teresa, Costa Rica. It's not my circle anymore. It belongs to the community. It's called the Santa Teresa Men's Circle. And that one's in person. So everybody shows up every other Tuesday night, and we just hold each other and do the work.
Amazing. Do you have a particular experience that happened in one of the circles? Maybe an experience of transformation that you could share with us about one of the participants?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many. I mean, every single men's circle you walk out, just a bit like mind blown by what transpires. It's truly magical. This one guy comes to mind where, oh, and by the way, men's circles are usually confidential, right? So I'm not going to name any names. There's an agreement to keep everything confidential in the circle, but this this one guy, he started sharing how he felt like he's just not fulfilled in his job, and how he felt like that's what he needed to do, that's what the expectations were around him, to like just stay in his job. So he sat in the king's throne. We did a workaround, and he started discovering for himself that he's been being a bit of a people pleaser, like living up to expectations, even though they're not really in alignment with his own joy, his own heart. And he had all this pent up anger. And some men's circles, by the way, that there's a space where you can do some anger work. And because men get very disconnected from their anger. And anger is a very healthy emotion. That's the emotion of the warrior. And you need a strong warrior to protect and defend and set boundaries. So we did a little bit of anger work with him, and this was actually online. And he started just releasing the anger by hitting a pillow, right? And he was sitting on a couch, grabs a cushion in the couch, and just starts really going to town on this pillow, and then yelling at it. And it went on for like 3 minutes. Some of the other guys got pumped on Zoom, and they started joining him too. They're like, I'm going to join you. And then there's all this primal release happening. It's finally like that wave passes, and he's catching his breath, and we're like, how do you feel? And he's just like, I feel good. I feel so much better. It's like, yeah, I just feel like I've been having to be nice to everybody all the time. Anyway, so the result, he texted us by the end of that day saying, hey guys, I quit my job and I'm going full time with my business. And his business that he'd been just dipping his toes in and moving along slowly. He just like decided to go full throttle with it. So just beautiful to see somebody like just experience a transformation like that. And there's so many I could share, also some of my own. So it'll be up to you if you want me to share more.
Wow, I love the idea of anger work and releasing like that. And I find it something that's so applicable, not only to men, but to women too. I think it would be so helpful. to release all that anger and stress and tension. Amazing. Yes, you offered to speak about your own personal experiences. I'd love to hear a pivotal moment that you had or experienced, with regard to your own rites of passage or your initiation, and how it ended up shaping you today.
Wonderful. So, in regards to my experience with initiation rites of passage, I haven't had the fortune of participating in a super traditional, legitimate rite of passage ceremony with somebody who has earned those stripes to be a space holder for something like that. I feel like I was actually blessed to be held through a initiation process by nature and some guidance of plant medicine, some guidance of spirits or God, who knows. But yeah, I had this really pivotal plant medicine ceremony where I got to speak to a spirit after releasing this resentment that I had for my mother. I was seeing how I was seeking my mother's the love that I never got from my mother. And by the way, my mother was super loving mom. She was amazing, but inevitably, as it happens with all human beings, we just always set the bar too high. I mean, if you think about it, we come there's infinite love, and then we come to planet Earth, and we've got two flawed human beings trying to do the best they can to love us unconditionally. Right, sooner or later you're going to drop the ball, right? So anyway, I saw in that plant medicine ceremony that I was seeking my mother's love in other women, and obviously that's an unwinnable game for women. So I ended up writing my mother this beautiful letter of forgiveness, acceptance, and unconditional love, just like letting go of all that resentment. And then before I knew it, this almost spirit is almost like was starting to talk to me, as you experience in plant medicine ceremonies. And I was writing down what I was receiving, and it said something to me like, your civilization has lost the rite of passage. That's why your men are weak and leadership is lacking. You've forgotten how to honor that divine feminine in your lives, and you've forgotten how to honor your mothers. So in that moment, I became completely inspired to explore rite of passage, explore masculine initiation. And at the same time, I had seen in that ceremony the level of pain that I hadn't yet healed within myself. There was lots of pain that I was carrying in my heart that I had that I didn't even know I was carrying, right? It was one of those blind spots. So I was gonna go to Costa Rica on my own anyway. So I was like, this is a perfect chance to just take some time for myself. And in that little beach town of Costa Rica, while the first 2 weeks where I felt kind of lost, this incredible process started to transpire where I was coming more and more into my heart, into my body. And looking back, I realized, like, wait a second, that was an initiation experience. And I've explored this a lot. Like, what does initiation even mean? And I don't know, maybe this is one of your questions coming up. To me, it means someone that knows who he is or who she is. And that's what I experienced in Potrero in Costa Rica, that beach town, that I discovered the essence of who I really am. And I also became committed to honor the truth of that essence. And therefore, I saw all the things about myself that I needed to stop and cut out from my life if I wanted to honor that. So there was also some grief process involved. And that's kind of how I got started in initiation and rites of passages.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I, having grown up in South Africa, I was very familiar with the terms of rites of passage and initiation because they're very present in local culture. But I feel like more and more as we've moved forward, we sort of lost them in a way or become disconnected from them. And I love that you are, working with them and bringing them to the forefront again and putting them in the important position that they are. And more than that, I love the fact that you are using sort of more traditional methods along with contemporary methods, adding in psilocybin, plant medicine work, anger work. I think that's fantastic. I wanted to ask you, how do you sort of navigate the balance between traditional and contemporary when it comes to rites of passage and initiations?
Well, initiation isn't the ritual, right? When you think of initiation or rites of passage, there's a lot of beautiful pictures that might come to mind of a beautiful ceremony or ritual. Definitely has its place and it's beautiful. That's not the initiation, right? So that's the magical thing about initiation, is that it's something that happens within the human being, right? So that's why actually it could look different ways. So it's not so much of like, okay, do we want to go a more traditional route or a more modern route, or how do we navigate, the fact that we're not in some jungle where we can go in a vision quest for 7 days, and fast in the woods. It's more about really looking at, okay, what's that process that transpires, and how can we facilitate an experience that is going to allow for that process to transpire, for you to really meet the truth, who you are, and the depths of your psyche, sit in those shadows and discover who you really are, right? So I haven't actually thought so much about, how do we navigate a modern contemporary initiation alongside, compared to a traditional initiation. Instead, I've focused more on the process and how do we just facilitate that process. So when I've worked with guys one-on-one, it's different for everybody. I'm like, hey, where do you live? What's the surrounding area like in your town? Do you have the resources to travel? Do you have the time that you can take off work? Right. So I worked with guys that, have their full-time job at an architecture firm, and they don't really have days off. So how do we do initiation there? Right. So we managed to do it. Whereas I've also worked with some guys where, they can go to the mountains and take on at least like a 3-day long weekend, and spend it alone. So there's many different ways to do it. So it's not so much about ritual, the ceremony, or the motions, as it is about the internal process. How do we move through that?
Understood. Very well explained. Thank you. And
Yeah.
Cesar, I imagine that you work with both single guys sort of across the board. And
Yeah.
I know that you recently became a father to a beautiful baby boy. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And, I think fatherhood is probably one of the biggest initiations into manhood. I wanted to ask how becoming a father has impacted you and, your perspective on masculinity and your own personal growth.
Beautiful question. Absolutely. Fatherhood is indeed an initiation into another level of masculinity. And it's not an easy one. And sure enough, I hear more and more stories of fathers that left their relationship with their pregnant woman, because they just couldn't work it out. And it's a tough process. It makes me sad because the guidance is lacking, right? That's why these men's circles are so important, because when you have somebody that's gone through the process and can share from there, it's so invaluable. It's priceless for the other man to hear. For me, yeah, I'll never forget my own experience in that journey, through pregnancy, becoming the father. And that is a whole other level of learning to embody that it's not about you, right? So that's the initiation in of itself, is you really getting to the core of your being, that it's not about you, all those desires that you have, those things that you really needed to satisfy yourself with, to receive from your partner. You're just not going to get them whenever you want anymore, you know, and, and you got to learn to have that be okay. And it's such a tricky thing to navigate, because we live in a culture where a lot of people are preaching, you know, ask for what you want and set boundaries, and don't settle for anything less, and when you're an expecting father and your partner is nauseous in bed, she can't get up and go, she's the morning sickness becomes all day sickness for like a whole month, you don't get to just get laid whenever you want, or get the food cooked that you want, or feel like cared for and affection and receive all the affection that you're used to receiving. So what are you going to do when that happens? That's the initiation.
Yeah, and it sounds almost like a type of surrendering to being of service as opposed to
Hmm.
sort of sometimes the self-centeredness that comes with it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, then when the child comes out,
whole
it's a
other
whole other
level.
level, right? Yeah, now it's really like, okay, so what do we do? There's this little human here, I felt like doing this, I felt like receiving that, but but what do we do? We can't, so there's that's the learning to be a father. It's just like, hey, like, you're not always gonna come first, and that's okay.
And at the same time, there's a lighting up of your being when you speak about it. So I guess that's the payoff or the trade-off.
Yeah, no, there's a beautiful light at the end of the tunnel. So you kind of break through that, which is, again, it has its challenges. When you finally break through that, you're just like, wow, like, I'm a father now of a child. I get to like steward this human being, be a sort of guiding light for him, be his hero. And they're just such the love bugs, like they're just beaming love all the time. So yeah, you get that reward, but I could think for myself, if I'm really honest, even when the baby first arrived, like I was having a hard time being in that joy bliss bubble because I'm still a bit fixated on like, oh, but I'm not getting what I want right now, and eventually poof, you just learn that lesson. If you do, some people don't and they leave and they go look for someone else is gonna satisfy their needs. And that's that, but it's just a temporary. That's one thing that if I could say this to all guys. I wish somebody would have told me it's temporary, men. Okay. Eventually, she's gonna come back. You're gonna have this beautiful environment and space in your relationship again, but there's gonna be a while where it's just not much space for you. The baby and the woman are in a very intimate relationship. And sometimes there's no space for the father in there. The father has to provide the bigger space for the two of them, provide the space, provide the environment. So yeah, that's it.
That's a beautiful message. Thank you for saying that. And, I think it helps clear up definite misconception around all of that. You did it beautifully. And
Yeah.
speaking of misconceptions, earlier you spoke about, the ideas that people have in their heads around rites of passage or initiations. And I wanted to ask you, and also with regard to the gentleman that you spoke about who was a full-time architect, what are some of the challenges that men undergo today when sort of facing rites of passage or initiations, and how do you address them in your circles?
First one is trying to see the finish line while they're still in the starting line. And I definitely dealt with this myself, where I was like, if you just show me like the checklist of the things that we're gonna move through, like I'll do better in moving through them. But it's just not that kind of thing. In fact, I've written about this, how initiation today actually has to include more than anything a journey of reconnecting with the heart. Back in the day, indigenous people, they lived immersed in nature, so nature provides a perfect environment for you to remain connected to your heart. But men today, we're disconnected from the heart. So that's also one of the top challenges is, okay, before we even get moving, get you into your body, reconnected with your heart, and then we'll be able to really start doing the looking of what there is to move through. What are the patterns where you still haven't cut the cord between you and like mommy and daddy, and you want them to come and make it all better, or you want to go out there and try to prove to them that you're enough, and that sort of a thing. So those are some of the initial challenges is reconnecting to the heart, arriving in the body. It's a lot of men today, including myself, when I first stepped into this process, we're disconnected from our body, we're disembodied. And that's a whole conversation on its own. We could do a whole episode on what that even means. And since men we're all like up here, rational and logical, we're trying to like almost solve this thing, because this is what we do, right? We solve and fix things. We're trying to like solve this puzzle of how we're going to get to that other side. What is it going to look like? And it's just not a mind phenomenon, right? It's not what initiation is about. It's not happening in the brain. It's a process about going into the depth of the hearts where you can meet the essence of who you are and take that on for the rest of your life. So hopefully it answered your question a bit.
It absolutely does. And I love the, going into your heart and the being connected with nature. And, I recently interviewed someone who took part in the School of Lost Borders, which was, it's very similar to Vision Quest and Soul Quest and those types of things. And a lot of it was the reconnecting with nature and then the creation of rituals and ceremony around everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And incorporating as many rituals and ceremonies into your day-to-day life, and how even, something simple in nature can become a type of ritual. And I wanted to ask, how do you incorporate rituals and ceremonies into your practice and into your circles to sort of help foster or facilitate deeper transformation in men?
Yes. So every man that I work with one-on-one, by the way, there's a distinction between the work in a men's circle and the work of an initiation, right? So the men's circle is kind of just accountability and that are going to support you in going deeper into your heart and being true to yourself. That usually not a sufficient depth and container to really go through a whole initiation process. So with the men that I've worked, that have taken on an initiation, which is a one-on-one work, and also actually it could be a group phenomenon as well that I'm actually going to be doing more of in the future. One thing that remains constant in every person that I work with is a fire ceremony, right? So fire is the element of transformation, right? So I know from me when I was those 2 months in Potrero, just kind of trying to find myself. I just stumbled upon this phenomenon. You know, there wasn't much to do in that town. You either would go to the beach or the grocery store. That's all there was to do. So I would watch the beautiful sunset and then just I was moved to like spark a fire, you know, and I'd started making fires pretty much every night for 2 months. Maybe I missed like 2 nights. And before I knew it, I felt this process transpiring, just sitting there by the fire, gazing at the fire, looking at it closely. And at some point, it felt like the fire was talking to me. And it wasn't until much later that when I started doing research, I saw how like indigenous people for a long time work with the spirit of the fire. They call it Abuelito Fuego in South America, right? And they say prayers and they share intentions with the fire. So now I invite men to do that work for themselves. And like we said before, the fire is the element of transformation. So really, what fire does, it brings destruction so there can be creation. You can also say it brings death so there can be new life. So that's the incantation that we bring to the fire is what in me needs to die so there can be room for new life, right? What's the old version of myself that need to be put to rest so that I can give way to the new version of myself that wants to be born, right? So that's one of the rituals that we do with the fire. It's 90 minutes. You start fire wherever you can on your own. It's got to be in a solitary environment, and yeah, that's one of the main rituals. Besides that, every day becomes a ritual. Every day, at least 1 hour. I tell people if you don't have 1 hour a day, first hour of your morning, then we can't work together. Or you need to be able to carve out 1 hour where you're going to do your own morning ritual. And there's meditation involved in that. There's some body movement involved in that, some conscious movement, stretching, getting back into the body, and exercises to reconnect with the heart, start to speak to your heart, start to listen to how the heart feels. So there's a morning ritual every single day.
That's fascinating. And I love what you said about fire and the explanation around that. You also spoke about new life and, rebirth. And that sort of leads me to the next question. I wanted to hear from you. Where do you see the future of men's consciousness work and sort of the role of rites of passage in really fostering a healthy masculinity?
I think I'm definitely noticing a growing trend here. I think men are hungry for this work. I think a lot of men, it's almost like something that they don't know that they need or want. But when they stumble upon it, they're like, oh my God, I so needed this. So it's been wonderful to witness other men's organizations like take off, right? So and more of these organizations being born, more and more men's circles being started. So I believe in a future where a masculine initiation is going to be a normal, regular thing for every single man within my lifetime.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cesar, what is your message for the world?
My message for the world is be true to your heart, connect with the heart, heal the heart, and be true to your heart so you can love yourself. And then you'll naturally want to love and take care of everyone around you.
That's a beautiful message. And actually, I want to take a moment to acknowledge you for, first of all, being on this interview with me today. I continue to learn more and more from you. But the most important thing is that you always a shining example to me of someone who always follows their heart. And you have from the moment I've met you. And not only do you follow your heart, but you are pure heart. And I also want to acknowledge you for being an amazing father, an amazing husband, and also for being such a powerful stand for men's consciousness work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Guy. I really appreciate that. And you for creating a platform like this and taking the time to broadcast these messages to the world, because it's definitely needed today. I think everything that you see that's dysfunctional out in the world, everything that's going on is really goes back to the microcosm, right? It's a function of the individual self, the lack of connection to our own essence of love. So thank you for creating a platform where we can reconnect with that essence.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for those of you who have been watching today and you've enjoyed the information that Cesar has provided. Please like, share, feel free to put comments below. Cesar will definitely see them and answer them. We'll also be putting links to Cesar's men's consciousness circles and to his website. I highly encourage you to get hold of him. And Cesar, we look forward to having you on the next interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gaia. It was a pleasure.